Zeke open us up.
Welcome, dear Lord. We thank you for the opportunity to adjourn here. We thank you for this wonderful city. We thank you for the generosity of just so many of our citizens, Lord. And as we sit here and we think about the budget and how we can spend the money that has come our way, Lord, that we will be wise, that we will be prudent, that we will be diligent, and that we will honor you in all that we do, Lord. We thank you for this evening. We thank you for those in attendance. And for those watching, Lord, we pray that we will honor you in all we do. In your name, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So we will begin our evening budget meeting. We thank you for your enthusiastic attendance this evening as we gather together. We are going to, I want to kind of set the stage for this a little bit. We want all the presentations to be made before we ask any questions. And I think that'll help maximize our time together. So each of us needs to certainly make a list of questions that we may want to ask along the way. And then as we then get back together at the end of those presentations, we'll do so. So, and in hopes, by the way, that during these presentations, there aren't any surprises in any of the things that we're going to see, which I anticipate will be the case. So with that, we'll kick it off and give the floor to our city manager, Sean Strauss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, commissioners, and to staff that's in the room and to the public. It's not often that we get to say good evening. It's usually good morning for these meetings, but at least twice a year when we have our required public hearings related to the budget, it is at night, and so good evening to everyone. Let me just kind of start off by talking about a little bit about the process, and I know Commissioner McCarley oftentimes will comment on this. We're going to talk about a lot of money tonight. We're going to talk about a lot of budget expenditures, and it can seem for those who are watching like that happens quickly, but that's actually not the case. This has been a process that has been going on for quite some time. And some of the important dates to remember related to this process includes back in February, we had 2 days, the 7th and the 8th, we had our City Commission strategic planning retreat, and that certainly is related to the budget, and you'll hear a lot of presentation tonight about the funding that's being allocated to all of those different initiatives that the Commission has set. Then on July 28th, we had a full day for a City Commission budget workshop. In addition to that, through agenda studies and commission meetings and one-on-one meetings, we have developed a proposed budget that we are going to be presenting tonight. So the first required public hearing is tonight, and then the second required public hearing and budget adoption is scheduled for September 21st, and of course our fiscal year will begin October 1st of 2023. So just to kind of cover the agenda for tonight and the order of the presentations that are going to be presented to the public and to the commission. The overview is that we're going to start off with some budget assumptions. This is going to include our property value increases, both our known fiscal year 24 increases and our estimated 25 and 26 projections. We're going to talk about the proposed millage, and that was the proposed millage, at least for now, that was discussed at the budget workshop in those discussions with the commission back in July. We're also going to talk about some cost assumptions. These are related to controllable expenses and our health insurance rates for our employees and our retirees. We're going to talk about wages. Again, back at the budget workshop, we had our consultant from the Bolton Group here. We talked about that quite a bit, but we will present on that again tonight. back to the strategic planning. We'll talk about all the different strategic plan target areas that the commission has developed and the expenditures related to those. We'll talk about budget investments and additions that are specific to this fiscal year 2024 budget. We're going to talk about some of the commission initiatives where you at the budget workshop wanted to allocate funding for different initiatives, and we will cover those and certainly have more discussion about those as the commission desires. We will briefly cover the staffing changes, the personnel count for the city of Lakeland and where we're making some changes there. And then we will have our traditional pie charts, the budget summaries that you're all familiar with and used to. We will talk about our day's cash file and where we're projected to be in the day's cash. And then the commission's discussion about setting the millage rate. So that will be the order and the items that we will be covering tonight in this initial budget presentation and required public hearing. So to start things off, I would like to recognize our tremendous finance director, Mike Brossart, who is going to start off the presentations with some of those budget assumptions that I mentioned a moment ago. So with that, Mr. Brossart.
Offered to buy him dinner, and he's throwing out compliments. Good evening. What you're going to see with the next couple slides are very similar to the budget forecast that we had back in July. What we have been provided by the Property Appraiser's Office is an estimate of 12.15% growth for fiscal year 24. For 25 and 26, we use the best data available. Much of that is projected growth that we know of through community and economic development. And so with that, we are recommending 5% growth in 25 and 26. That, I think the last time we had a 5% was back in 2014. Most of the others were in the 6 to 7 ranges. This is the second highest we've had. 12.15 is the second highest we've had in the last 10 years. So it's been quite high.
I don't think we were fully on.
Oh, okay. All right. So it's been quite high the last few years. So at some point we expect it to taper off. So that's the conservative estimate there. For the next slide, obviously you've heard us in the past talk about being 45 to 60 days cash on hand in the third year out is our recommended number. We are using the proposed rate, current rate of 5.4323 mils. We Sean allowed everyone to go up and their department's controllable expenses up by 2.75%. And then had to explain all the exceptions for anything above that, and then he and a team would justify whether or not those would be approved. And then the last being the 7.5% increase in health insurance rates. We have had a good run for quite a few years in our health insurance plan, no small part to Joyce Dias and her team in looking for ways to save money, being proactive. But what we've recognized in the last 2 years is about $5 million in losses in the health insurance fund, to the point where we've got to now shore it up a little bit with some increases. And this is a larger increase than we've seen in the last probably 6 years at least. So, okay.
Okay, next we're going to talk about what has been for now programmed into the proposed 24 budget related to wages. And again, this is subject to approval by the commission, but at least for now, based on the discussions from the budget workshop, this is what's programmed in. Now, with what I just said, though, there are some exceptions where, because of contracts that we have with collective bargaining bargaining units, there are some of these that are now pretty much locked in because we've agreed through the collective bargaining agreement process. And so when you look at the screen here, you will see, I will point out the Fraternal Order of Police and the IAFF for our firefighters. They are both in the second years of their contracts. And so what you see here for them is consistent with what is in and been approved and agreed to by the City Commission and ratified for their contracts. And so for across the board adjustments, with the FOP, you see a 1.5% increase. With the IAFF, you see a 1.5% increase. Again, those have already been previously approved. With the IBEW, which is a very small collective bargaining unit that we have here at the city, we have to be determined. We haven't yet completed the negotiation process on that. We did receive just recently a memorandum of understanding for year one of their contract, and we're working through that as we speak. I think it covers 6 or 7 employees, so any adjustment would be very negligible, would not be a significant impact to what's already been placed in the budget. You will see for the first year, we just at the commission meeting on Monday approved the collective bargaining agreement with the UWUA for both electric and for water. And so you see that each of them would receive an across-the-board increase of 3%. So those are the across-the-board adjustments related to our collective bargaining units. There at the bottom, you will then see the merit increases that are proposed for those employees that are subject to those collective bargaining agreements. Again, these have already been approved and ratified in their contracts. And so those merit increases for the police would be 2.5%. For firefighters, it would be 2.5%. The same situation with IBEW, that's being worked on as we speak. Again, only 6 or 7 employees. It will not have a significant impact. And then again, as we ratified on Monday with the UWUA members for electric, it would be a 2.5% merit increase. And for water, it would be a 2.5% merit increase as well. And then finally, there's a third category, and we talked about this for the general employees, and when we get to that part of the discussion, I will give some more information, but there's a third category that's based on market wage adjustments where there has been market wage studies done, and we're trying to make sure that we keep our employees paid consistent with each of those markets for the job classifications that they're in. So again, as was ratified on Monday, that for UWUA for electric would be a 7% market adjustment, and for UWUA for the water employees, that would be 3.5% market adjustment. Now, the across the board increases that were discussed and the market adjustments would be effective on October 1 with the new budget. The merits that were discussed would be available to those employees that are eligible when they are eligible. So first they have to meet a successful performance evaluation to receive that, and most of those are then on the employee's anniversary date. Next, we'll talk about the general employees. And again, what we're going to present has been programmed in based upon the discussions that we had at the budget workshop. But I will tell you that it is at a lower percentage than what we previously discussed. And as I stated, for the general employees, unlike the collective bargaining units where it's ratified in their contract, it would require the adoption of the budget by the City Commission to then formalize these pay adjustments for all of the general employees. And so what is being proposed is an across-the-board salary adjustment of 3% for the general employees. And then, again, a merit, which is for those who are eligible based upon their performance review, and in most cases tied to their anniversary date. And this is where we're doing something different based on some of the information and recommendations that we got back from the Bolton group who did the pay study. And so what's going to happen is for those employees who are below the midpoint of their pay range, they would receive a 3% adjustment, which will advance them to the midpoint quicker, and that's the optimal point of the pay range where we need to try to place employees. For those employees who are beyond or above the midpoint, then they would get a 2.5% merit step increase, and that's pretty much historic. I mean, most years, for many years here at the City of Lakeland, 2.5 has been the merit step increase. And so for those employees that are in that upper range, they wouldn't be getting any less than historically what they have gotten for a merit step increase. You will recall when we had our consultant from the Bolton group here for that workshop, there were many recommendations. And so you see some of that here on this particular slide. So the recommendation is that we align with the public sector comparison group. So our market is based upon the public sector. We should be targeting what I talked about a moment ago, the midpoint, which is the 50th percentile for our pay structure. We will establish open ranges for exempt management and specialist career groups. This is really a conversion of something we already had. We in the past have called it our pay bands, and so it's more of a range than it is a step progression. And because of the consultant's recommendation, there would be more employees that would be added to that particular group. We will also retain the step pay plan for the vast majority of our employees. Those would be technicians, trades, operations, and support career groups. However, we will be reducing, and as you all are aware, for many years we've had a request coming from the employees that we reduce the steps down from the 19-step system that we've been in, so that it doesn't take someone 19 years and 19 steps to get from the bottom to the top of their pay ranges. And that came as a recommendation from the consultant. And so what would be included here would be a reduction from the 19 steps down to 15 steps. Then we get to kind of the third category discussion that I mentioned a moment ago, and we talked about at the budget workshop, where there are recommendations for specific job class market wage adjustments. And this is where we've compared the job classifications that we have within the city to the market. And in areas where, in job classifications where it has been demonstrated that we are below the market, we would then make adjustments to get those employees up to their market ranges. That's that third category. Now, what does that mean? What that means in terms of cost is, and so let me talk about that third category. It ranges, and it's different for every job classification. Some job classifications have been determined that they meet what the market study indicates, and so they don't need that third adjustment. But there are some employees, though, that are below it, and those are the ones we need to adjust. Now, those percentages of adjustments are different for every employee in every job classification. They're individualized. But the total implementation cost for that component is $3 million. And what that means is that is a 3.6% increase over the fiscal year 23, which is really, when we're talking about the 24 budget, looking back then at 23, it's a 3.6% increase over that fiscal year 23 payroll budget. Now, when we were at the budget workshop, we were talking in ranges of 4.6 to 5. We've continued to work through that data. We've continued to refine and make sure that we are truly comparing apples to apples in those job classifications that are being compared to from other agencies through the consultant. And so that has now been reduced, and it is a 3.6% increase again over the fiscal year 23 payroll budget. Next, we will talk about the expenditures in the FY24 budget that are associated with the City Commission's strategic plan target areas, and you see those different areas on the overhead now. For target area 1, we're talking about the target area that's related to infrastructure. The FY24 budget impact is $2,785,600. There are various funding sources. The CRA and the Transportation Fund are the funding sources. And then you can see some of the examples of the various different projects that would be, this funding would provide. So we talk about, a pavement marking maintenance program that would maintain and improve the markings that are on our transportation systems. We have some projects there that we've talked about and you are familiar with for the Lakeland Park Center Drive West Connector, for the 5 Points Roundabout project. And then we have $1,030,600 that is programmed in for sidewalk and trail projects. And there's various different projects that are in various locations throughout the entire city. And then we also have funding included in that $2.7 million that would provide some signage that we've talked about for our garages that we have in the downtown area. So those are the expenditures for and related to Target 1 infrastructure. For Target 2, which is related to economic development, there is a fiscal year 24 budget impact of $2,536,000. Again, there are various funding sources. Some of the items that are budgeted for includes the Catalyst 2.0 development. That's $100,000 being funded from the CRA. Now you will recall to date the city has invested about $400,000 into that Catalyst 2.0 development. That is the program that Steve Scruggs had previously presented. That looks at, based on land uses and available properties and existing properties throughout the downtown and in other different sectors, what could be developed based upon those entitlements. We also then have included in that funding various different development-related incentive funding for related development, and that's about $600,000, and that is the Manufacturing and Research Incentive Program and also the Polk County Bonus Incentive Program. So $600,000 related to those incentive programs. And then we also have included the Oak Street mixed-use redevelopment and parking garage partnership that we're all very familiar with. We have another subcategory related to economic development that's related to education, and so the fiscal year 24 budget impact is $512,664. Some of the things that are funded for in that allocation includes 3 different programs: ACES High, Flying Classroom, and Elevate. Those are all aviation-related education funding that would be provided. Our Power Academy at Tenorock High School that Lakeland Electric supports is funded in this money. We have $168,953 for our internship program here at the city that you all have seen expand pretty greatly over the last few years. There's also funding available for our Big Brothers Big Sisters School to Work program. Now, we've experienced some real success with that program. As a matter of fact, this past year, we have now graduated our first class, and that's a 2-year program. So we've experienced 2 years now. Our first class has graduated. Our second class will graduate in 2024, and then we plan to continue picking up classes as we move forward in the future. That's a real unique program. That's where the Big Brothers Big Sisters organization brings students from our local high schools here to the city of Lakeland. We have staff, we have employees who are then assigned, and we have Big Brothers Big Sister relationships, and they come every month, and we have various different opportunities with them. We talk about personal financing and education and you know, all kinds of things that's good to connect with from our city staff with those high school students that we're fortunate to interact with. And then we also have $175,000 included in that amount for tuition reimbursement for our employees here at the City of Lakeland. The next target area 3, is related to affordable housing. The 2024 budget impact is $2,886,555, again, coming from various different funding sources. Most of these are related to programs that help with rehabilitation of residential units, purchasing residential units, construction of those, and also repairs related to those. Now, in addition to the 2.9 that's presented here, as the commission is aware, we have another $1 million that is included in ARPA that's allocated or earmarked and planned for affordable housing initiatives. And then there's another $1 million that we discussed at the budget workshop as a commission initiative that we will talk about later in our presentation. Next, we have target area 4, which is related to City Hall communications. There's $168,900 included here. $15,000 of that is to then be added to $15,000 that we budgeted last year to go toward the employee engagement survey that I've talked to the commission about. We had hoped to do that this previous year. We were a little surprised when we saw the responses to our proposal and the cost to do that work. So we're adding another $15,000 and should be able to do that in the upcoming fiscal year 2024. Other funding in here is related to employee celebrations. We do one of those a year. We also do some service award celebrations when employees meet certain milestones, and other types of awards and recognitions that we like to give to our very deserving employees. The citizen survey that you're familiar with, that when we're at strategic planning and we talk about the feedback and the information and the statistics that we got from the community, that is funded in here. And then there are other training programs that we fund. This is training programs for city staff. We refer to one as LinkedIn Learning. We have our onboarding program when we every month meet with our newly hired employees and we talk about the city's mission, vision, and values, and really start to indoctrinate them into the culture of the city organization. And there's some other leadership programs for city staff funded in that amount. In the next target area for Parks and Recreation, there's $35,000 that's being funded out of Lakes and Stormwater and from the water utility. And this is for water education and water education and conservation programming that will be at the Florida Children's Museum at Bonnet Springs Park. So $35,000 associated with that. Target area 7, public safety, $923,589 from the general fund. This has a lot to do with expenses for recruitment for both the Lakeland Fire Department and the Lakeland Police Department. This is everything from pre-employment polygraphs, psychological evaluations that have to occur, where we sponsor cadets at academies, advertising when we have openings and the like. There's about $230,000 for those who we sponsor while they're in the academies, and we are paying them during that time. And then there's also some tuition vouchers and equipment that those different cadets will need, and that's about $50,000. The largest portion of this funding, about $623,000, is related to the 12 fire personnel that we are adding in order to implement the Kelly Day that we've talked about and was a part of the collective bargaining discussions and agreements with the collective bargaining unit at fire. So the grand total of everything that was just presented, which is being budgeted, newly budgeted in the FY24 budget for those strategic planning initiatives that the City Commission has set through that process. The total is $9,848,308. Wanted to then take a look kind of historically as to where we've been in the last few years when we look at the budget allocations toward those strategic planning initiatives and target areas. And so you can see where we, in fiscal year 22, it was a total of about 8.2 million. In 23, it was over 20 million, but now that was when we implemented the body cameras and the dash camera systems and the taser systems that we now have at the Lakeland Police Department. So if you look at that, you know, over $9 million of that 20 million was allocated to public safety. And now for FY24, you know, we do see growth from 22, and we're at the $9.8 million. And so over the 3 years, the total has been $38,228,601. Next, I'll present what's been programmed in terms of budget investments and additions, and these are related to cybersecurity and information technology for $210,000. Infrastructure support equipment, and that's $1.4 million. Public safety technology, $54,000. Additional vehicles specifically for lakes and stormwater and the wastewater utility of over $113,000, and additional operating and maintenance cost that total over 2.8. So the total of those are $4,629,754. And I will give some examples and talk through what a lot of that is associated with. So for instance, for cybersecurity, we have allocations for transparent VPN. That's all cybersecurity protection related assets. We have multi-factor authentication tokens. The commission is aware of that now. As you're using your phone and you're signing into your emails, there's a process that requires multiple different actions in order to, again, kind of from a security posture, make sure that we're protecting access into our networks. And then there's also some cybersecurity related technology for that's related to building inspection and some of the different software and programs that we use there. When we talk about the second category and in terms of infrastructure support equipment, most of that is specialized vehicles or machinery. And so there's funding for an oil tanker and an oil tractor. There's a generator tank that's needed. There's a truck with aero board like you see out on the roads when we have crews out there, and you've got a truck and it's pulling a trailer that's got an arrow so that people realize that they need to move over to, you know, a different lane. A tanker truck to haul water. A Vector truck that's used in public works in many cases to Vector out our sanitation transmission lines. A compact boring machine. And then we've talked about this one before. For some time, we've needed to reconfigure the space that we have for our communications department, which is very limited down on the first floor. And so there's an allocation here that would provide for some of the spatial needs that we have in the communications department. In the public safety technology, those are the license plate readers that we've recently discussed, $54,000 there. The additional vehicles for lakes and stormwater and the wastewater utility, there's a supervisor that needs a vehicle. I believe the position was added last year. The employee was, and now there's a vehicle for that employee. And then there's also a new vehicle that's needed out at the wetlands, at 7 wetlands. In terms of additional operating and maintenance for Lakeland Electric, it's over $1.2 million, but $982,000 of that is associated with the landfill closure and the capping of Unit 3 when we shut down Unit 3. These are expenditures that are mandated by the EPA and are not controllable by Lakeland Electric. This is what we have to do as a result of capping Unit 3 from that shutdown. There's also some software licenses and maintenance needs at Lakeland Electric in the amount of $255,000. For Parks and Recreation and Cultural Arts, we've talked along the way about the incredible increases that everyone has experienced related to chemicals and fertilizers, and so there's an allocation for those increased costs. Same thing for agricultural and horticultural supplies. We have various pieces of equipment in Parks and Recreation, and we need various different parts to maintain them, and so there's an allocation for that. At some of our locations where we have public internet, like libraries and the like, there's a small allocation to improve some of that public internet access. And then there's also an increase in our golf merchandise budget. The good news about that is those are items that are sold, and so we get a return and a profit on that particular increase in the budget. In Public Works, which is about $519,000, we have increases or additions to the budget. One is for vehicle replacement parts, tires, and some contractual services that are related to our fleet services and all of the work that fleet services does to maintain and keep our vehicles and equipment operational. We have an allocation for some solid waste disposal contracts that we have. We have steel container maintenance contracts with an increase there. New steel dumpsters and roll-off containers that we use. We have about $112,000 that's budgeted in as part of that. And then back to maintenance and janitorial supplies and the increases that everyone has experienced related to those items. In risk and purchasing, we have over $96,000 as part of that total, and that is primarily related to increased cost for physicals that employees must receive, and also the driver's license checks that are done to ensure that everyone has the appropriate licenses and can operate the city vehicles that are associated. In the water utility, over $800,000. Again, primarily that's for chemicals, about a $541,000 application for the chemicals. There's also some security enhancement at some of our facilities, and then an allocation related to one of our Polk Regional Water Cooperative items. In the city manager's office, it's small, related to software licenses. It's about $1,748, so very negligible. So these are the investments and the additions that are programmed in to the budget related to the items that I just covered. And again, the total is $4,629,754. On the next slide, and I made a reference to this earlier, we'll talk about some of the proposed commission initiatives that we've discussed along the way. I think all of these were covered when we had our budget workshop, and so you can see those here. An allocation from the general fund for the Polk Museum of Art expansion. That's $250,000, and you might recall what the commission discussed was $250,000 in FY24 and another $250,000 then in FY25. We've talked many times about the small business development CRA programming, where we're partnering with BBIC and Prospera, and so $200,000 that was allocated for that. out of the commission's initiatives. There was the mayor's council on the arts general fund expenditure for $275,000. And then I referenced this earlier when we were talking about affordable housing. The commission wanted to allocate $1 million out of the affordable or out of the general fund for the affordable housing initiative. And so the total of all of those initiatives really can almost be added to the initiatives that are also covered in the strategic planning target areas. It's $1,725,000. We talked about this at strategic planning, the change in staff from 2,144 full-time positions to 2,165 full-time positions. Most of that are in areas that are related to growth. And as we talked earlier, 12 of those positions alone are related to fire and the implementation of the Kelly Day. And so we're consistent with what was presented at the budget workshop. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Brossard, our finance director, and he will walk us through the budget summaries and the pie charts that we've all been so familiar with, and the day's cash file and the millage discussion.
All right, thanks, Sean. So this first slide, many of you are used to seeing. This is just all the revenues for the entire budget. The lion's share, of course, is charges for services. Of that $518 million, almost $397 million of that is Lakeland Electric. Do remember, though, that within those Lakeland Electric charges, most of that is fuel and purchase power that is simply a pass-through. So the other larger portion of that is about $77 million for water and wastewater. So about $475 million of that $518 million is for electric, water, and wastewater. The others are solid waste, about $19 million, and stormwater, about $8.5, and so forth. So this next slide it's usually a race back and forth at 50% between fuel and purchase power costs and personnel costs. They tag back and forth depending on the cost of fuel. So this year, personnel is going to be slightly more expensive on a budgetary basis than the fuel. The next largest piece is capital outlay. There's two large costs within the capital outlay. One is LE that we know about $44.5 million, finishing up the projects that they've got going, as well as some pay-as-you-go projects. And then water, wastewater is about $34 million of that total. The rest are miscellaneous throughout the organization. The next larger piece of that is debt service. About 42 million of that 74 million is Lakeland Electric, and the rest is spread amongst water, wastewater, airport, public improvement fund, and so forth. Okay, so the general fund revenues that we've got up here. Of course, the biggest piece of this is property taxes. Again, this is using Marcia Fox's estimate of 12.15% in growth, as well as the 5.4323 in millage. The dividends, the next largest piece that I would want to focus on is what makes that up. About 32.6 million of that is Lakeland Electric. That's very similar to what 23 is estimated to be. The water wastewater is about 9.7 million between the two of them. They're actually 4.85 million apiece there. Public improvement funds contributing 3.6 million to the general fund, and solid waste is about 1.6 of that. Okay, everything else is pretty self-explanatory. I think the only one that stands out to me, fines and forfeits, that could seem high. Well, 1.6 million of the 2.2 million is red light cameras. So that's where the lion's share of the fines come from. That's the revenues, that's not the expenses. They're covered elsewhere. Okay. So the last piece is the general fund expenses, and as you can see, that too is very self-explanatory. Slightly less than 50% of the general fund is public safety, with another 17% for Parks and Rec. So we're hitting public safety and community services. So no questions on that. We can slide on to the next one, this is just a historic, we've always tried to provide a historic viewpoint of our millage. As you can see, in 2015 going into 2016, that was the discussion amongst the commission at that time of either implementing a fire assessment fee or accept a millage rate, and the fire assessment fee was not as popular as the millage rate was, which would be surprising. So it was 0.9 mils increase there. And then you can see just slight changes, a tenth of a mil in 2019, and then another small decrease in 22. This last slide is very similar to, but not exactly what we showed you from the budget forecast meeting in late July. The biggest change is because we got, Ms. Joyce got an unpleasant surprise. She finally got the numbers back from the request proposal for property insurance, and what was estimated to be about 15% increase in property insurance ended up being 138% increase, I think, in property insurance. And so what it did is it took our city cost less the utilities from 1.5 million a year to 3 million, a little over $3 million a year. Okay. So what did that do? That the general fund cost for that is about $900,000 a year. So that took 6 days of cash away from this. We showed you 84 days cash at the end of 26. It was our best estimate. So all things shaking out, we would have been there had it not been for that unforeseen surprise. So that's what's baked in. Okay. Now this next slide is one that most of you have seen on a regular basis. What we try to define is the parameters that we all must operate within, especially the 7 of you, with regards to choosing a millage. Okay. The first box up there is the rollback rate, and that's defined by the state of Florida. And that's simply taking last year's 2023's estimated property tax revenues and applying the millage that it would take to get that same with this new value that the property appraiser has provided for us. And so what that does is take it to 5.0030 mils is considered the rollback rate for the state to get the same revenues that we have now. So then the state defines a simple majority threshold, and what they do is recognize that there are cost increases, and so they define what is a CPI or a growth factor, and they apply that to the rollback rate. That then calculates out to be 5.1451. You can see what our proposed millage rate is. That's what we advertised. And then, of course, the maximum millage is the last item that the state defines, and that's simply taking the millage threshold and adding 10% to it. And they say that is the maximum that you can raise it with a 3/4 positive vote. So for us, it would be 5 of 7 positive votes to get to that. I know there's been no appetite to be up that high, but we always try to define the parameters with which we're working. So just as a reminder, if for some reason tonight the commission decided that they did not want to use 5.4323 and wanted to go higher, we would then have to go through the process of notifying the state and the property appraiser and then re-advertise again. So that's the parameters that we're working within right now. So with that, I'm done unless there are questions about that slide.
So with that, Mr. Mayor, that does complete the scheduled presentation, and now certainly we'll answer any questions or provide additional information. You have both the finance director and myself, and again, we have our department heads and other related staff in the audience, and we'll stand for any questions from the commission.
We'll take the questions. I want to compliment you on the comprehensive aggregation of this data and putting it together by the strategic initiatives, because I think it's so good for us to see how that all rolls out and the work that has been done to be able to, by department, to define these things at the same time that we're working on some pay adjustments in the process of that. And so to see it come out at 78 days cash for fiscal year 26, which is in our parameter range, is encouraging based on all the work that has been done. So thank you for that. So questions from commissioners on any portion. Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor, and I concur. Sean and team, well done on the presentation, and it is great to see the allocations broken down by strategic planning target areas, just as a refresher of some of the things we talked about. It seems like way back in February, but a lot has happened since then. Mike, can you comment on the debt service, the 10% and the budget expense graph, just historically, is that it's a little bit higher than where we've been, or is that close to the number we've had in years past?
Slide 24, right?
Yeah, it is maybe a touch higher right now in Lakeland Electric, simply because we had an unplanned additional $70 million, but not anything concerning even the rating agencies. Okay. So, or me, for that matter, or our financial advisor, or anybody else, Gina Jacoby. That's still, we're still well within our range, and it still fits into our payoff model, which is so very important, which is how we ladder our debt service such that we don't have spikes and valleys that then change the anticipated. We can't control what fuel's going to do to our ratepayers, but we can affect the base rates by the biggest piece being the debt service for that. So even with this additional amount we recently had to close on, it's not concerning, but trust that if I smell that in any of the departments we are going to get concerned, I'm going to be shouting from the top of the dais. I will not be quiet about that.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Thanks.
So the cost is not the issue. It's the amount of debt service on that unplanned 70 million with LE that really makes that a larger percentage of the.
A larger percentage, but again, not even concerning to the rating agencies. And they are paid to be especially concerned about any upticks in costs or debt ratios or anything like that. So.
And it's this kind of budgeting that maintains that lower interest rate that gives us the higher rate, gives us the higher rating for the lower rate. Commissioner Reed.
Thank you, Mayor. There again, and I think a February meeting, I'm not sure when it was, but I brought up our proposal for the commission initiatives. We have that extra $1 million in the affordable housing issue. I would like to move that, stay in the general fund. I think we're going to need it at some point in time. If nothing else, we can put it toward debt service. I'm a big conservative, want to keep our debt low. And for those, there's a number of things that I think I pointed out the other day. We just approved 88 units the other day as part of these funds. It's $490,000, and we got 1.5 units, what we paid for. For $490,000, we bought 1.5 units. $308,000 we paid for those units. So I don't think they're affordable, in my opinion. Also in Florida, Lakeland Winter Haven is the highest foreclosure rate in the state of Florida. Credit card debt is the highest it's been in all times. Loan applications are the lowest they've been since 1996. And median income is getting low, obviously, and we have $4.2 million homeowners are 90 days or late in their mortgage payments. I really think we're going to need that $1 million because we haven't spent all the money in the fund that's there. We got millions of dollars already left in that fund. And I would like to move that into the general fund or either towards debt service.
Other comments? Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you for the presentation as well. With regard to the $1 million with affordable housing, exactly could you explain where that $1 million will go and how it will be used as far as the affordable housing?
Let me ask our Community and Economic Development Director, Brian Ruiz, if he could come up and answer that question with greater detail, Commissioner.
Okay.
Good evening. For the record, Brian Ruiz, Community and Economic Development. Perhaps a little greater detail. As you saw most recently on Tuesday with the approval of the local government area of opportunity contribution for the Housing Authority's Twin Lakes Phase 3 project, these types of opportunities come at us generally on an annual basis, although the nature of the tax credit market in Tallahassee now, or their universal cycle, is limited to a county award every other year. So when Polk County, whether that's Lakeland or Auburndale or Winter Haven or unincorporated Polk County, a project is awarded low-income housing tax credits for an affordable project, rental project, then the entirety of Polk County and all of the local governments in it are ineligible for the next year. So I understand completely the concern about the appearance that there is sort of an excessive carryover in that affordable housing sort of collection of funds, and the city manager went through the sources of a number of those housing-related programs. But we have to be ready when the opportunity presents itself. That's not me advocating necessarily for this $1 million, but with the program, or excuse me, the project that came to you on Tuesday, that was our opportunity, as Commissioner McLeod pointed out, in agenda study to leverage the CRA monies that have been pledged where prior projects up in the Griffin Road corridor were outside the CRA, so we're not eligible for CRA funding. So each of those different sources has different rules and geographies and income levels that we have to respect.
Thank you. But we do have about $3.8 million in that account right now, don't we?
That sounds close. I don't have the exact carryover plus new monies for FY24 that are proposed.
We haven't spent what we had in 23, I don't believe. But I'm just want to be conservative, and like I say, if we put it in the general fund, we can always pull it back out and put it in there again.
If I could make a comment on this, because we know where we both stand on this issue. You know, affordable housing is the most chronic problem we have in America in terms of creating the place where, because there's very little advocacy for people to be able to start with their rents and have places to live, and then workforce housing on top of that, and then we get into more market-raised housing. When affordable housing is inadequate, we don't have all the rents go up. And so that makes what's already bad worse. Our turn on the investment of that $1 million historically on is 27 to 1, is it not? So for every $1 million set aside?
Well, every $1 billion invested has, over the last decade, generated about $27 of additional affordable housing investment, whether that be from the federal or state government. To Commissioner Simmons' question, I apologize if I didn't answer it fully. The process, as it was for this most recent Housing Authority project or for the ones that came through a home program ARPA allocation that went to Gospel Village, and to another project I can't recall right off the top of my head. Those were requests that we advertised for applications from qualified developers. I will add, and it's so timely that I believe it was yesterday that the chamber did with Senator Burton the Live Local update. And at the same time, I was in Jacksonville with Chuck Barnby and sat through 2 Live Local updates from the Florida Housing Coalition and some land use attorneys affiliated with the Florida chapter of the American Planning Association. So our ability to sort of leverage the intent that the legislature and the governor had with passing Live Local with additional dollars that will see the financial feasibility of sort of redevelopment of commercial and industrial sites that were made now eligible through Live Local without the need for land use and zoning changes is all the more impactful, because I'm not convinced at this point that those policy changes in Tallahassee are enough to bring about the sort of the gap that needs to be filled between a market rate project and an affordable project. You know, the cost for land use and zoning approvals is real, but it really is not nearly enough to cover that gap, a point that I made with an attorney from the Housing Coalition up in Jacksonville.
Thank you.
And when we see affordable housing being built by those private developers that are willing to do it, they're going to do it in a city where they have the most incentives to be able to do it. And there's set-asides in other cities that are far larger than this. This is why we have been able to do so many more units than we have done historically. We did, in a 10-year period of time, almost 200 affordable housing units, whereas we're at 860 some in the last 6 years because we put an acceleration on this. And every one of those units matters if you're going to get someone to be able to have a livable housing first kind of orientation to be able to get started. And that matters when we attract employers, because they want to be able to see that there's enough places for people to live. So as we grow and we have this very important dynamic of both having infrastructure that supports it as well as affordable housing that's in place so that people have livable means of being able to have a place to live, and then workforce housing on top of that, and blend it throughout the city, which is what we're doing. This allows us to be able to be in a position to have great responsible growth while we control the parks and the areas and the way our city keeps both the charm that it has as well as the density that we inevitably have to accommodate. Any disagreement with that?
None at all, but I would add one final point, and that is the same types of inflation and supply chain pressures that the city manager described for our internal departments are pressures that are on our affordable housing developers, who even when funded and permitted and under construction are now facing the almost impossibility of completing their project and getting it occupied, so are coming back to us asking for additional gap assistance to get them across the finish line, because they, even with the increased costs, is then the delay in getting the materials that they order, you know, in the extreme 14, 16 months later, waiting for huge electrical panels that are just taking that long to get.
Commissioner McCarley.
Thank you. And while you're there, Mr. Ruiz, on slide 14, it's the strategic, our objective about the inventory of affordable rental units, and the budget impact is 2.8 million. And this might be for Mr. Brozart. The funding sources are CDBG, Home, SHIP, and CRA. Are those all pass-through dollars, or are they, I just need a little bit of clarity, and maybe that's a Mr. Brozart question on the funding sources for that, because some of that seems to me like it would be state or federal dollars.
Oh, absolutely. CDBG and Home are both federal HUD programs. Right. And SHIP is a state program, of course, through the Florida Housing Finance Corporation. We are an entitlement community for all three of those programs, so we get our annual allocation. The dollars that are represented in the FY24 budget impact are only those pieces of those grants, right, dedicated to the development of new affordable rental units, meaning our public service grants to our nonprofit agencies and our Parks and Recreation Department, any infrastructure projects, and I believe some of that CDBG money is funding a sidewalk in Northwest Lakeland in FY24. So those dollars are not included as a part of this strategic objective.
Right, I just want to clarify for the public that those are not necessarily from our general fund that are reallocated. Those, and I don't want to call it a pass-through, I don't know what the right word is, but just for a point of clarification for the public.
They're grants.
Yeah, they're grants, so they're not necessarily coming from general fund or CIP of us. So that, I think that's hard sometimes, is that when we're going and running through this really quickly, and just to concur with everyone, I really liked our presentation that our city manager put together with our finance department. But just for point of clarification, those come to us from other places, and they have, to your point, Mr. Ruiz, for the public to also understand, there are a lot of nuts and bolts that go into those grant-making entities. So it's not just a check that is being handed over to our Community and Economic Development Department, though, to be willy-nilly with and just write back out. It has a lot of benchmarks. It has a lot of deliverables that have to be provided. So I just wanted to make that clarification for the public at large. And the Live Local legislation that Mr. Ruiz just referenced came through Senator Pasadomo's office, who is the president of the Florida Senate. And it was her kind of passion, and she worked with a lot of the legislature to really make sure that these funds are expendable and that they're coming through state government. So historically, just for the public, our SHIP and is it SAIL, which is not listed, they had often gotten hijacked in the state legislature, so they weren't necessarily allocated. So there's been a really concerted effort for the last several years to make sure this funding is applicable to municipalities and to other entities throughout the state so that we can address the affordable housing crisis. Would you agree with that?
I would. The Sadowski Trust Fund and the SHIP and SAIL programs, the SAIL program, State Apartment Incentive Loan Program, actually is administered directly by the Florida Housing Finance Corporation. That does not flow through the city of Lakeland or any other local government in Florida. SHIP does, but they're having fully funded that in concert with Live Local and the policy changes and the tax exemptions now, ad valorem tax exemptions that will or may become available to developers of mixed use projects with affordable units at the proper thresholds, could prove to really put a dent in the shortage of affordable units in Florida.
So even though this was a target area of the City Commission, we're thrilled about this. I just want to be able that we're reflecting that this is not necessarily allocated by the City Commission. This is something that is coming to us that we're going to expend efficiently because it's state dollars in addition to city dollars.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other comments by commissioners? Commissioner Madden.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Brian. I think it's also important to know that 6 years ago when we had our homelessness review of Lakeland and had an opportunity to invest in certain nonprofit organizations who deal with homelessness, to maybe invest in officers to focus on homelessness. At that point, or even rental vouchers, for folks to stay in their home before becoming homeless, this commission decided that we would rather invest in brick and mortar with P3 partnerships and to have every dollar that we spend be leveraged with private money, state and federal money, instead of just giving money so that one family can stay a few months longer in an apartment. Because if we don't have enough apartments, then it doesn't matter if they get a rental voucher or not if there's nowhere to go. And that's what we saw. I remember in particular looking at some other cities like Greenville, South Carolina, and Chattanooga, and being excited about their growth and things that they were doing that were exciting. But then reading in the fine print, some of the things that they felt happened is that people were left behind and they became unaffordable. So we weren't even growing at the pace that we are now. I don't even think we dreamed, even 6 years ago, we would be undergoing the growth that we have. But we decided as a commission that that was important to us, and we would rather have money set aside in a fund if there was money to join forces with private dollars, state and federal dollars, so that we could be proactive and be able to begin to have the brick and mortar units, so that then the folks who do invest in rental vouchers and other healthcare organizations or some of our homeless folks, advocates, they could share that burden. They work in that every single day. So I would be, I know that, for you are, a consummate fiscal conservative and are looking for every way to make sure we're being frugal. That 490,000, I don't think is exactly, you can take that as a percentage of units and say that's how many units we built. I think rather you'd say those units would not have been built in Lakeland had they not had local contribution. They would not have been able to get the state funds. They would not have been able to get the federal funds if we didn't have that set aside. So like we do incentives for large corporations who bring employees and jobs here, I think it's just as important that we have incentives to make sure that we are a part of building those affordable units, not by ourselves by any means. I really like that $1 to $27 leverage ratio. And if it's not this year, hopefully it's next year that we get to participate. Or I know also, Brian, that we've had the Vermont Place. Talbot House had an opportunity and needed a place to go right from Talbot House, especially veterans, to have a place to live in a one-apartment scenario. So we were able to maybe put some funds in something like that. Or you mentioned Gospel Village. So there are other things that we can use to leverage those dollars specifically towards getting homeless folks into homes with wraparound services. But none of those dollars are just going out of the city coffer $1, paying for $1. We only like to send it out if it's $1 for a large private investment along with that dollar.
Agreed. For those, sometimes I lose sight of sort of the very impactful projects that we've seen just over the last 3, 4, 5 years. And, beginning with Ada Palms and then moving to Midtown Lofts. Vermont Place, of course, was a bit opportunistic for the Midtown CRA to be able to partner with Talbot House and see that redevelopment come to fruition. But then more recently, we've seen 2 blue sky projects on Griffin Road. So that's Swan Lake Village and Swan Landing, and now Parker Point next to Tiger Town, where we were able to lease that property to Green Mills for 99 years and take advantage of hurricane housing recovery dollars resulting from Hurricane Irma. Yes, Irma in 2017, to bring about those 80 to 90 units now adjacent to Tiger Town. Those are really big, impactful projects that most cities would be happy to get one of in 5 years.
It's a hard road, and it takes incremental opportunities, and you have to be in a position to pull the trigger. So that's kind of the why. Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. Brian, are there about 150 to 200 units right now that are completed but we can't get a CO?
I'm not sure I understand the
I think
context
there's 2 apartment complexes that are totally built. They can't get a CO because they're missing some electrical boxes or something like that?
Well, there is a project that we are meeting with the owner developer tomorrow morning to talk about that very instance. It is Parker Point, it's Green Mills, and they have now been waiting 14 to 16 months for a significant electrical panel component. I've talked to Strickland Construction at length about it. It isn't a matter of funding, it's a matter of can't get it.
Right.
But they are now up against sort of a deadline with their funders, not us, but the state of Florida, and are probably going to have to borrow some money to sort of meet their obligations until they can get that done and get their CO and move income qualified families into those units.
The $3.8 million we have right now, where does that come from exactly?
It comes from a collection of all those sources that were on the slide earlier.
All different grants, right?
I'm sorry?
All the different grants we've gotten?
And the general fund commitments that the city commission has made, and the CRA dollars that are dedicated to the affordable housing strategic objective. Yes, sir.
But the $1 million I'm worried about is something different, general fund money.
It is the new $1 million. There's general fund money that is in a carryover situation now that has gone to those blue sky projects on Griffin Road, but is also able to go to additional projects. What's reflected in the slide for tonight is simply the new allocations for FY24.
Right. Thank you.
So if I may, just Commissioner Reed, on the slide, when we looked at the just under 2.9 million, to Commissioner McCarley's point, 3 of those funding sources are kind of pass-through. Then there's the CRA, which is certainly city-related.
Right.
Then in addition to that almost 2.9, there is the $1 million from the ARPA funding.
Right.
And then there is the $1 million from the general fund that you're referring to that was kind of a commission initiative-led item.
Correct. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on any portion of? Yes, Commissioner Music.
Thank you. Can we look at slide 9, please? And this was one that, we've talked about since we were, kind of initiating the study. And I was, as an employer writing checks, I was nervous where that was going to end. So, quite impressed with just the 3.6% increase on that. Can you tell me, and I apologize if I missed it, how many employees does that cover in the 3 million that were exclusive of the other employees that would have been police, fire, things of that nature? How many employees is under that?
How many employees that are general employees?
Correct.
Not part of the collective bargaining units?
Correct.
That were impacted by the study and then this adjustment.
Yeah. I don't have that number. Mike, are you pulling that?
I can tell you,
And again,
just a minute, but I cannot tell you how many people are getting raises,
So
but I can tell you how many
And that
have
was going to
been
be
evaluated.
my follow-up, which is
Right.
fine if that's the case. But that's the goal is ultimately what I was happy for, that we're able to look at these and get them in that mid-range, because that's what we're always talking about. Here's the commission, whether it's electric rates or fuel rates or whatever it is to be right in the meat of the middle. So that was my question. But we can get.
And Commissioner,
I've got it. It's
okay.
1,265 positions were looked at, 1,265 people, not positions. Because you had many that were in that same position, 1,265 current employees. So if there were vacancies, they didn't fill out a form, they didn't, right? So 1,265 is what is on our list between exempt and hourly coworkers.
Okay.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, and that's why that number was making me nervous
But
until
Mike,
it came through.
Mike, I want to be sure so that we're clear though, when you're saying the 1,265, those were the positions and people studied. That's not the number that will get that market adjustment.
Correct.
Is it?
Correct, yes.
So-
And
we can get that number.
Yeah, that's a
We
different-
don't have it with us at the moment.
And that would be good for the next meeting for me to have. And if I could have another question on, when we look at our buy rate for power versus what we would be able to produce it for, do we know what that difference is?
I'm going to defer to Beckham or Ms. Gina.
And if we don't, that again is something that for the next meeting, I'd like, if we just, the difference in what we're paying for power as opposed to when the time comes that our engines are up and we're generating it ourselves.
Yep, Mike Beckham, General Manager, Lakeland Electric. There isn't a set rate.
Okay.
It kind of varies. It's going to fluctuate with the market. If we're in a position where we have to buy power instead of generating it ourselves, well, first of all, many times we buy it from within the power pool, and we pay very similar to what we would pay generating it ourselves, or slightly more. But if we have to go outside of that in a time when there's a severe shortage of power in the state, and the prices are higher, it would be higher at those times. Just in general, I would say that those aren't all that frequent. And what we can probably bring back, or what we can get, is an example maybe of a time where we went out and had to buy power at a much higher rate. And then I can probably provide some sort of a more normal type of a pattern.
Just because we know that, fuel and purchasing power is expensive, I just was curious of that balance. So thank you.
Yeah, that'd be great to have an average as well as a worst case scenario.
The high is, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get some data on that.
Good, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Commissioner Madden.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just wanted to clarify again, kind of like my colleague, Commissioner Music, on the pay study. So it looks like with the UWUA that there was a larger gap with regard to electric market jobs and Lakeland Electric. So those in the union, had that bump of 7.8%. 0% increase. Now, when it comes to the folks who are not in the union that work for Lakeland Electric, they would have had a specific job class in the market study, and then we can't really see, what that increase is, for the specific classes. So it's just a general 3.6% increase, kind of an average, and a $3 million total. So I am a little concerned, only because I know that energy is going through such a radical disruption, the biggest one in the history of the planet. And it is probably more difficult to get jobs for an electric utility, engineers and such, than maybe other jobs in the city of Lakeland. So when you say that we had a public sector market analysis, did those public sector market jobs, I know we're the third largest electric utility, municipally owned electric utility in the state. And so, are we sure that it was apples to apples, knowing that not very many cities have large electric utilities like we do that service 260,000 folks? So just, that was my only, thing, seeing that it was kind of a higher bump for our electric union folks, thinking, well, maybe there was a higher bump needed, for the Lakeland Electric folks overall. And I know that they were experiencing some challenges getting engineers and things like that. And so we just want to make sure that, knowing that we get such a large revenue dividend from Lakeland Electric, and that they are more of a business, that they are getting the fair market analysis as they should, and it's not just comparing city workers with electric utilities. So I would love a little explanation on that.
So again, all of that was compiled, by the consultant, by Bolton, but certainly kind of to the point of apples to apples. I mean, they are looking at other public municipal ran electric utilities. I know that, and I believe it was even mentioned by the consultant when he was at the workshop. They also use studies that are industry related. So like information that the APPA has and others. And all of that is factored into what the market is for those particular jobs in the question that you're asking related to the electric utility. And so it is a combination of those industry, reports that they have access to, like the ones that come from APPA, in addition to then studying the other similar cities that have the electric utility component. And all of that is then blended and averaged together to come up with what those ranges are from minimum to max.
Okay, and that would have been across the country. You mentioned APPA, so that wouldn't just be Florida.
That's correct. Yeah. Let me just, if I may, Mark Farrington, our HR director, is here. Mark, is there anything else other than what I just covered that we might want to comment on?
No, we're fine. You're absolutely ready.
Okay. I
That
wanted
was
to make
yes
sure.
from Mark Farrington.
I just want to add something. As we went through the negotiations with UWA, both electric and water, the pay study that was done by HR was exactly the same pay study that was done by Bolton for the generals. Okay, exactly the same. They were trying to use as many of the same comps, both industry, as Sean mentioned, as well as local ones. And so there is no difference, really. There really was no difference. And so and even to the point where HR, Cindy Marsh, was actually taking the data from Bolton for the generals and then saying, okay, did they really look at folks inside the electric utility market for, say, engineers and those types of things? So it was an identical process, if that helps.
It could be that there are some folks who had a higher bump. We just aren't privy to that on this report, knowing that it's more of an average.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, I appreciate your concern, because your concern is for the entity that is self-funding to a large degree. Are we making sure that our compensation is adequate to keep the people we want to keep on board in a very competitive market? And I would assume that that is something that you and Mr. Beckham have coordinated.
Well, and to that point, Mayor, and to answer even further Commissioner Madden's question, each department has sat with our HR representatives and have gone over what's in these adjustments for each department. And they've had an opportunity, if there's any concerns, to point those out. And we've continued to refine this since the process started. But it is a compilation of not only what we got from the consultant, but also those consultations and discussions that we've had with each department to make sure that there's not something that they may have concerns about that we need to address.
Good question. Other comments or questions? All right, well, that could move us into item A1, and I'd ask our city attorney to weigh in.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have two items to act on this evening. One is an ordinance adopting the tentative millage rate, and the second ordinance is adopting the tentative budget. First ordinance is proposed ordinance number 23-034, an ordinance relating to ad valorem taxation, establishing the millage rate for the city of Lakeland, Florida for the fiscal year commencing October 1st, 2023, and ending September 30th, 2024, providing for the levy of ad valorem taxes, finding the millage rate is 8.58% greater than the rollback rate, providing an effective date. And again, that will require tentative adoption by the City Commission this evening after asking for public comment.
All right, so is there a motion? To approve. Motion to approve, and a second?
Second.
All right, discussion by commissioners.
Go those numbers again so I can write them down. Yes.
You want the actual
Yeah,
proposed millage rate?
Yeah, 5
All right, so the proposed millage rate is 5.4323 mils.
Okay.
The rollback rate is 5.0030 mils, so the proposed millage rate exceeds the rollback rate by 8.58%.
Thank you.
And that would require a 5-vote majority.
Correct.
Discussion by commissioners. Any discussion by members of the audience or questions? Seeing none, this is a roll call vote. Commissioner Simmons?
I believe Commissioner Madden had her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mike, could you remind us what this day's cash is again on this? I feel like, did I miss the slide?
Sure, can you slide back to the day's cash, please?
This one. Oh.
There you go.
These two. There. You good?
Commissioner Reed, are you good? I thought maybe you might have.
Know about the days and stuff? Well, I'm just complaining about $1 million and all of this.
Well, and I wonder how does $1 million affect the day's cash?
3 days.
Michael? Oh, how will that $1 million affect our day's cash? Do you know?
Well, it's a one-time, and so you're probably 2 days. 2 days. You did $1 million in what, 23, and $1 million in 24. So the question is, are you going to continue doing $1 million a year, because that will affect you materially. So that's part of the question you would need to ask yourselves. But for right there, you're talking 2 days, thereabouts.
And our goal is 45 to 60.
Right.
We're at 78.
But I would also remind you, yeah, I'm going to be a broken record, but look at the movement between years. That's the most important part.
Commissioner Music.
Just to comment on that, but Commissioner Reed, you're talking, though, about taking that $1 million and leaving it in the general fund so that it can be utilized somewhere else anyway, so it's not going to really affect the day's cash on hand.
Correct. Well, that's my point.
Okay.
I think we may need it somewhere else, as opposed, we've got plenty of money in that fund already, $3.8 million.
It would affect it, because right now it's shown as an expense of $1 million.
So by putting it in the general fund, it would not.
If you choose not to spend it, it would move your day's cash in 26 to 80, probably 80, 81.
Okay.
That's my contention. Why spend it just because we got it?
Well, we show it as an expense. It isn't expensed.
If we have it in the general fund, it wouldn't be an expense, would it?
Well, it's in the
Until it's
general
pulled.
fund, but it's shown in the expenses of the general fund, so it is considered expended. For this budgetary purpose, it's considered expended.
Get that.
So I would just mention, I'm not in favor of putting it into the general fund, but I was curious if you were wanting to look at the millage rate at a reduced rate, seeing if it still gave us our goal of 45 to 60 days cash.
Well, thank you. obviously, I'd like to have lower taxes too, but I don't know if it's something we want to attack tonight. We're on the verge of getting this thing all accomplished. We've had Sean and them have done a great job with our employees, and I think that's paramount. That was our first obligation to our citizens. And of course, our people out here in front, we want public health and safety, stuff like that. So, but I'm just, I'm gonna probably vote no because I'd like that $1 million to go into the general fund. I think there's some place we may need it later. We can always put it back in that housing fund if we need.
And the first ordinance that you're voting on is just the millage.
I know that.
We're
I
not
understand that.
doing that now.
The second ordinance will be where you put things.
I understand that.
Okay, so going back to any other questions on the commission side or comments? Thank you for catching that. I'm sorry I missed you on that. And then I'm going to reopen comments for the floor, just for sequence. So if you'd like to come up to the podium, ma'am, right here in front of us. The center, right?
Yeah, been here a couple times.
Okay. Just please state your name.
My name is Gloria Hodgson. I'm president of Foxwood Lake Estates Property Owners Association. I'm here again about North Lakeland Fire Department. All right, the first question is, have you bought any property yet in North Lakeland? Can anybody answer that?
It would be good for you to know that that's a strong in process, I think.
Okay, so it is. Now, the next question, I assume it's going to take a while to get the land, to get a building. I do understand you have already ordered a fire truck engine. So my proposal is, can we, North residents and myself in North Lakeland, have a temporary fire station in, let's say, Lakeland Mall? There's plenty of room up there. Half the stores are gone. You've done it for South Florida, put a temp up. So I'm asking, can we have a temp? Because it sounds like we're not going to get this. This has been on the board for 4 or 5 years. Sounds like it's going to be a couple more years, at least, before it's completed.
So two things. One is this kind of a question really belongs in the audience portion later because it's different from what we're talking about. The comments we would like.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. And we'll count them towards our listening. We hear you. That's a discussion that we'd certainly want the fire to respond to. But if you have any comments about millage, that's what we really.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Okay.
You're fine. You're fine.
Okay.
That $1 million, you don't know what to do? Fire station, North Lakeland.
Great.
Okay?
Great.
Go right there.
Thank you very much.
All right, so, because I do, when it comes, so I can ask other questions
Yes, ma'am.
when
You
it
can
comes
ask
up to that?
Right, you can. Let's
So
just
you
wait
want
for
me
the
to sit
audience.
down? Is that what you're trying to tell me, Bill?
Ideally, ma'am, thank you. Appreciate it. And that's okay. We're family here, so
I know that.
that's right. All right, so any other comments by members of the audience on the millage issue? This is a roll call vote. Commissioner Simmons.
Aye.
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 Yes.
Aye.
Unanimously passes. You got your 5, sir. All right, that brings us to item number 2.
Item 2 is proposed ordinance number 23-035, an ordinance relating to appropriations, providing for the appropriation of monies for the city of Lakeland, Florida, for various purposes for the fiscal year commencing October 1st, 2023, and ending September 30th, 2024, providing an effective date.
Is there a motion to approve?
Move for approval?
Second.
All right, discussion by commissioners.
Is this where I vote no? No?
Yes.
As far as you would consider that, yes.
Yes, sir. Any discussion or other questions from commissioners? Any from any members of the audience? This is a roll call vote. Commissioner Reed.
No.
Aye.
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 So we're a 5-1. All right, that completes that portion of the business. This gives an opportunity for any other comments by city commission first.
I would certainly like to comment that I would like to see a temporary fire station in the Northwest also. I don't know where that's going. I don't know when we're going to get it done. But given the growth that we're having in Lakeland, And I certainly agree with the comments that the citizen made out there. I just want to make my point known.
No arguments, sir. City Manager Traus.
Mr. Mayor and Commissioner, if you'd like, I can speak to that. Certainly, Chief Riley and Chief Williams are here,
Okay,
and they
great.
can round out any other comments if you would like me to address it.
I think it would be, to the extent you're comfortable, go.
Okay, so, Fire Station 8 is one of our highest priorities here at the city. We have a massive wastewater trunk line project that we are working on. We have several high priority projects, but Station 8 is certainly one of those. To the question about the temporary station, that is an option. That is certainly an option that we will consider and have considered. It would be a shame to spend money on a temporary solution if we could instead use that same funding on a permanent solution. If we can't come up and make the permanent solution happen, then certainly a temporary station is absolutely an option. Now, where it would be located and kind of questions about the mall and other, that all depends upon the property owners that we are working with frequently on trying to acquire a site either permanently or temporarily. We are negotiating. We have some options that are positive, at least looking positive, and we need to continue that process out. I will share that even on one of the options, we have ordered and had an appraisal from the city's perspective done, and that has actually been now finalized even just today with an outside appraiser. So we are continuing to negotiate, and there are multiple options. We hope to be able to close out those options. If it starts to look like they're in fact not going to be options, then we do need to maybe consider more the temporary solution. It's just not ideal because it's a temporary fix and money spent for that. And so that's where we are, but it is, as I've indicated, I mean, there's daily work being done, including the appraisal work that we know was completed by the consultant, the outside appraiser today. Chiefs, anything else, I would ask you to come up and share if you'd like.
Good evening. For the record, Doug Riley, Fire Chief. No, I share the same comments as the city manager. We have had some conversations about, when and where we look at a temporary location. And I have the same concerns that the city manager does. I don't want to sink a lot of money into that we can't recoup, that's going to take away from our project of building the new fire station. And, a lot of work's gone into, and it's a lot slower than what we would like it to be to find the property. It really don't matter how much or how little we spend on property. If it's not in the right location, it's not going to do us any good, and it's certainly not going to do them any good. So it's more important to me for our community that we find the right property in the right location rather than to, build in the wrong location that really won't help us with our response time. So we'll keep pressing forward with that. We'll keep having conversations about what we can do in the interim. And just, for clarification, it's going to be probably June, July next year before the truck is delivered. And then, we also have to hire the additional staff, which has been a challenge here lately. So, and we'll do our best to get all that up and running. So even if we did something, it would be at least then before we could realistically have conversation about putting something in place.
And you're talking about in that response to a temporary facility.
That's correct.
Imagine
Yes, sir.
that you had property purchased November 1st. I'm just going to throw this out. How long would it take you to have a station up?
The way things are going now, I'm guessing 2 years, and that might be aggressive to even think that because, as Mr. Ruiz said, there's challenges with getting supplies and getting materials and getting, subcontract and all the kind of challenge that we're seeing with the growth the way it is right now. Okay. So,
okay.
Got a question.
Yeah, Commissioner Simmons.
What would be the process in establishing a temporary fire station?
Property, obviously property that we didn't have to spend a ton of money on, and then what we have done in the past with Station 7 had like a modular that we rented, and we set the modular up and we run a fire truck out of there with personnel. But then, we have to put the communication equipment in there where they get the tones. And, we want to protect that brand new truck. We don't want to just park it outside where it's exposed to the elements and things like that. But something along those lines, and we will definitely look at, available property. We will look at maybe there's some options of some stuff that we already own that would be in a good location that, that we could do that without spending a lot of the money that it takes away from our project.
Right, I certainly understand that. I'm also thinking, have you considered a time duration whereby if you haven't gotten your property for your permanent station, at what point in time would you consider using a temporary station?
I don't have an exact answer for that. Probably, we've already started having some of the conversation of what if, we don't get where we need to be in the time that we want to get there, that we would evaluate other options. But, certainly have a plan in mind what we are or aren't going to do by the time that we have that truck delivered and we have those personnel hired and trained and ready to hit the road.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Commissioner Music.
Thank you. Question on that. So, to hear 2 years, considering the length of time is it's a big deal. But when we talk temporary, we might be talking a little less expensive. We might be talking a little bit quicker, but when we have to order and get things anyway, what are we talking about lead time if we had to put up, or if that was the decision was to do a temporary, what would we be looking at?
I think it would come down to if there's a vacant building that somebody was willing to let us use that we can move in right now versus if we have to get a modular, and I don't know what the current availability of those are and the delivery time and all that kind of stuff. So,
but are we thinking we could cut that down by a year? Is it, does it take just 6 months? So it's a year and a half?
I don't have an answer for that yet, but we'll have answers.
I'll just be curious.
Yes, sir.
And back kind of to Chief's point, a lot of that would depend on if we find something that already has a building that we could use versus if we have to, come up with something. The other thing I wanted to comment, when Chief talks about location, that's the other challenge here is that it's not just locations that, that we can afford where there's a willing seller, but you also then factor in, the size of the property that we need. The other piece that's very unique to fire is the transportation network that's connected to that property, because we have got to be able to get the trucks out and on the transportation grid and able to respond quickly. So all of that, it limits what our opportunities are, but we are working those opportunities every day, trying to acquire what would meet our needs.
It has been far more challenging than we had anticipated, and just know that it's a high priority.
Yes, sir.
Other comments on that? Any? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Commissioner Madden.
I just wanted to thank you residents for coming out. Look, between your neighborhood and our city staff and the 7 commissioners, there's not a lot of other people in the city of Lakeland out here on budget hearing night. And so I am so proud of y'all. You get an A+. You are the dream team for North Lakeland, caring about your community and making sure the citizens are safe. So I think all of you deserve a round of applause for coming and being in this meeting tonight.
Any other comments by commissioners? Any members of the audience? This is your moment. So if you have something else you'd like to discuss, please come forward. Just state your name, please.
My name is Danette Lockwood. I live in Lakeland, and I know you're all familiar with this, but if I may just have your indulgence and read 3 sections from the Florida Constitution. Article 1, Section 1, all political power is inherent in the people. The enunciation herein of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or impair others retained by the people. Section 2, all natural persons, female and male alike, are equal before the law and have inalienable rights, among which are the right to enjoy and defend life and liberty, to pursue happiness, to be rewarded for industry, and to acquire, possess, and protect property. And Section 5, the people shall have the right peaceably to assemble, to instruct their representatives, and to petition for redress of grievances. I know we've all seen a lot of increased traffic in Lakeland, loss of local farmland, water bills are increasing. Lakeland Electric has raised fees for the people $50 a month, approximately $600 a year. Some of my neighbors who are from another country and they entered here lawfully, they purchased a home, they were never informed that they had the opportunity to request a homestead deduction. And they have seen and are suffering from their property taxes skyrocket from $700 to $3,000. If this continues, we're going to start seeing people lose their homes in this county. I am asking if there's anyone on this board who can help provide some relief for those wonderful people right there. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, your question is, can they apply for a homestead deduction now?
Yes, they can, but they were never informed that they had that opportunity. It didn't exist. They're from Poland. They do speak English, but they never knew that this was even an opportunity for them. There's no way, they had no information for this, and this hit them like a gut punch, because like, how are we gonna come up with this money? And the opportunity is there, but they were never informed by anyone. And I'm just wondering, can anyone here help them with some relief for this situation, please? Thank you.
Thank you. To that end, I would certainly recommend that you contact the United Way, and there is a 211 number that you can dial with respect to that to see if they have any bridge opportunities for you. Okay? Other comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
if I may, I mean,
Yes,
that's also,
sure.
that's an issue for the Polk County Property Appraiser's
Right.
Office for Marcia Fox. And so I would encourage you to reach out to Marcia Fox. The deadlines on applying, I know those are statutory, and there's even opportunities to appeal. I do believe at this time that opportunity has probably passed, but I can't say that for certain. So I would encourage communications with Ms. Fox at the Property Appraiser's Office. I know that when you purchase a home as part of the closing documents, but we all know that's a book of documents, but there's also information provided there as well as to what those deadlines and appellate opportunities are. But Ms. Fox would be, and her staff could provide better information than we can.
All right. Is that helpful? Well, I think there's two alternatives in this that it should be. One is that I think you would want to make certain that they are in contact with United Way, and the second is on the Properties Appraiser's Office, if there is any opportunity retroactively, you could find out that information. Okay. All right, other questions or comments? Please come forward. Just state your name, sir. And thank you for joining us.
My name is Charles Jackman, and I'd like to dovetail on what she started as far as property taxes. We moved here last year in '22, okay? And we were saddled with a $2,800 plus property tax. The previous owner of the home that we had bought was not current, and he took his homestead exemption with him. So we paid that begrudgingly, but it's the cost of doing business, I guess. But now this year, as I look at the proposed property taxes that I'm getting for 2023, so far it's over $2,000. And I'm getting hit with quarterly bills of $600 and some odd dollars for property taxes. Now, what is the availability of checking into this and getting some justification?
It's the same office, the Property Appraiser's
Well, I'm sorry, but we can't hear you out here.
The Property Appraiser's Office with
Property Appraiser's Office?
Appraiser. In Bartow. It's at Bartow.
In Bartow.
Yeah, because it's a county decision. That office runs out of the Board of County Commissioners office.
Okay.
And so there's an appraiser, and that appraisal office sets the value for the county on increases. So that 12% isn't something that we decide upon. That's something that, as across the market comparisons took place, that's the number they land on. Our millage is then tied to that percentage increase or decrease, which is why that was shown at 12.15% for the first year and then 5% lower the second and third year, because we don't know that there would be those kinds of increases in property value in subsequent years.
So it's a property appraiser in Bartow.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Polk
thank you.
County.
Polk County.
Yes, sir, and that is one of your elected constitutional officers, Ms. Marcia Fox, the property appraiser, and they apply Florida law, but also Department of Revenue guides that process, and so they can provide you with much greater detail and information and assistance than we can here at the city, because it is the responsibility of that elected constitutional officer.
And they,
Yes, Commissioner Reed.
There again, did you move from Florida? Did you move from a place in Florida?
No.
Okay, you can't bring your homestead with you. I was just wondering, if you moved from someplace, you could bring it with you, but invariably, if your realtor should have gone over all this with you. I hate to say that, but a good realtor will go over all those type of things with you when they close, if they're prudent.
Did you follow that?
but the property appraiser does have, certain age thresholds, that have a relief, along with the homestead, which provides relief. Also, how much percentage it can raise each year, by state statute. So, that's not our purview, but there are certain parameters in which you can have a reduced rate. So they do have that information that we just don't have on your specific situation. Like with the other ladies, they might even, I'm not sure if the property appraiser would have certain relief for folks moving inside the country, but they may if you call Marcia Fox's office, and if they don't, maybe that's something you could advocate for, because like City Manager Sherrill said, it is an elected office, and so they are supposed to be responsive to the citizens.
Fauxx is her last name. And ma'am, if you'd like to come forward, just come to the podium, please. Again, just please state your name.
I'm Sandra Jackman, I'm his wife, and we've been trying to get this straight for a year. We go down to the place on I believe is it Parker?
Parker.
Yeah, well, they sent us over to the auto place. We go over there, they send us back to the other place, say they can't do that. And all of our neighbors are paying half the taxes that we are.
Yeah.
And the reason we came tonight was because our bill said, if you want to appeal your property taxes, show up at this meeting. So that's why we're here.
It's not this meeting, it's the county's meeting. And so,
But it said September 7th at this address.
Okay, well,
Are we in the wrong
for
place?
the millage request.
Are we in the wrong place?
Not for the millage.
Not for millage, but we can't set your property taxes.
Okay.
So that's county function. We take the county's set point that they determine annually, and we attach our millage to it as the rate that we multiply by. And so all we're talking about in this meeting is that millage factor.
Okay. Well, we misunderstood on the bill then.
It's okay. We're sorry that there was a miscommunication, but that's where you want to go for a solution.
Appeal, if you want to appeal your taxes.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
If this couple would like, when we're finished here, I worked at the property appraiser's office for about 12 years, many years ago. That's kind of how I got started in public service. I'd be happy to meet with them. I can give them the contact information. I can try to answer some of your questions, but more importantly, we can get you in touch with the people who can assist you.
Great.
I'll be happy to meet you after the meeting.
Good, thank you, Sean.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from the public or questions? All right, seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Sean, I got that number. You can find it.